So in this video I'm making some garage shelves as we're in desperate need of storage in here. We actually had some plastic ones before, but most of them were destroyed when the wife ran into them with her minivan. These shelves are pretty much identical to every other one you'll see on YouTube, except for the fact that I'm throwing a miter saw into the middle of it. And to help provide some outfeed space for the longer cuts, I gotta have it level with the bottommost shelves in the build. I'm also gonna install some T-tracks to the lower shelves so that we can add some stop blocks to the whole thing, which should make repetitive cuts with the saw a lot faster. Here's my model in SketchUp. You'll see that I'm going with 3 shelves on the left with right all screwed into 2x4s, and the shelves themselves will be screwed into the wall for support. And of course in the middle you'll see a rough platform for the table saw. First thing to do is clean up the space. Nothing fancy when it comes to putting this all together. I was originally going to use pocket screws to hold everything together, but I couldn't find my jig, which is really the result of a messy garage due to no storage. So instead, I'm just using some long screws to hold everything in place with some 7/16 inch plywood for shelf tops. With the shelves assembled, I now start building them upside down and inside the 2x4x8 foot frames. This is one of the parts of the project where I slow down a little bit so I can do my best to ensure that things are level and plumb to the best of my ability. And just to give things a bit more structure, I'm putting a shelf in at the bottom here, which I'll remove later once I have more shelves in place. To make it easier to install those shelves since I'm in by myself, I'm going to cut some quick spacers at the miter saw and use those to keep my other shelves in place while I screw them to my outer 2x4x8 frames. And with the shelf done, all I got to do is flip it and rotate it. It was about this time that I looked at my shelves and I had a feeling that something wasn't right. Specifically, the bottommost shelf should have been much higher, as that was supposed to be level with my miter saw, and you can see it's just a scotch above my knees. So back to SketchUp I went. Doing some quick measurements at the model, I pretty quickly realized my mistake. Somehow on my model, my 2x4x8 foot supports actually were over 9 feet in the model. Probably came from me stretching a connected model or something, I don't know, but that error in size made my measurements for the shelf placements all wrong. So once I fixed that in the model and got new measurements, I was back to fix my shelves. If you look at the background, you see that I already fixed my first set of shelves and now I'm working on the second. Kind of funny story that after I learned I messed up the measurements, I tried to be a little bit too quick in fixing things and I had my shelves screwed into the supports by only 1 screw. So I can make some quick adjustments, level them out, etc., etc. Well, me going so quick like this resulted in the whole thing collapsing. But thankfully I wasn't underneath of it and really no wood was severely damaged, so I just rebuilt the first set again really quick. But this time too, I ended up only putting in the top 2 shelves because I knew I'd probably have to do some work on the bottom shelves just to get them level with the miter saw. Oh, and after the collapse disaster, I asked the wife for some help, which made things a lot easier. And lastly, you can see that I'm securing my storage to some quick 2x4s that I put into the wall. If you're wondering why I did this, it's because the back wall where the storage is doesn't run completely flat, as half of it has studs and half doesn't. So for the half that doesn't have studs, I had to put my own in real quick just to help ensure the whole thing doesn't kill us or destroy our cars. Now I'm in the home stretch for this project, which means that doing the miter saw base as well as the T-tracks to go alongside of it, which was definitely one of the more interesting parts of the build. T-tracks are basically little slots that you have to router out a channel for, and then once you put those things in, you can put stuff in like stop blocks, clamps, things like that. For something like this build, in fact, where I'm making the same cuts over and over again, something like this system would really speed things up and improve the accuracy of my cuts too, since I'm not remeasuring each time I do a cut. Nothing super crazy to install these. I just got the right size router bit, set to depth, screwed in a straight board as a guide, and then got to work. Oh, and I should probably point out that because the T-tracks were going in these shelves, I had to use something a bit thicker than 7/16 inch wood. I think I ended up going with 3/4 inch sand plywood, which the wallet didn't like, but got the job done. At this point in my illustrious woodworking career, I very rarely do any routing, so I was a bit worried about doing the channels, but honestly it couldn't have been any easier. I ended up making a shallow pass with the router, and then I went over and did a second one at the final depth. I also got to do some slow-mo recording, which may not have ended up being as epic as I would have hoped, but what you gonna do? Last bit of business was putting in the miter saw stop. Of course, the big thing that I'm worried about here is that it is as level as it can be relative to the shelves to the left or right of it. And of course, after I bang it in, make sure it's all level and I'm really happy with things, I realize that it's about 3.5 inches too high. Yep, after I made a mark in pencil as to where this should go, I completely ignored it and screwed it all up. But thankfully it wasn't a big gap, though I just had to undo it, move it down, and then level it all back up again.